Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from the Civil Service Examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 20th October 2022. The topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the timestamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. This topic has appeared at page number 12 in today's The Hindu Delhi edition. The topic reads, "We have to work fast to solve the challenges in space tech." This news article has appeared in the context that recently our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has inaugurated DEF Expo, which stands for Defence Expo 2022 in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. At this very event, he has also launched Mission Defence Space. Now, what is this Mission Def Space? The objective of this particular mission is to develop the innovative solutions for the armed forces in the space domain through industry and startups collaboration. So if you closely analyze this particular context, there are few important things which must be noted down. First is that this is related to the defense modernization. And second is that in order to promote this defense modernization, government is trying to include private players in this whole process and ecosystem. So that is why now the government is coming out of the conventional narrow wisdom that defense and space sector must be completely controlled by government only. They are now trying to integrate private players, industrialists as well as startups. So that is why, as far as the UPSC scheme of syllabus is concerned, this topic finds its relevance in two sections. One is the economic development, that is economy, and other is the security related part. Hence, this topic broadly falls under General Studies Mains Paper 3. In this very line, we shall now discuss that what are various dimensions which are associated with indigenization of the defense industries and defense equipments. So this flowchart will basically help us to summarize all the important dimensions associated with the indigenization and modernization of defense. First, we shall look at what is the brief historical context of this. But before coming to the historical context, we shall understand that what is the present status. We all know that India is the second largest importer of the defense equipments in the world. Further, India also has the largest standing army. India is surrounded by several competitive nations, for example, Pakistan and China. From three sides, India is surrounded by Indian Ocean, which is known for piracy, drug trafficking, arms smuggling, etc. So in order to tackle all these challenges, obviously, India cannot rely on foreign countries to meet its defense demand. And that is why in order to build the indigenous capacity, India must focus on developing the industrial base which is suited for the defense needs within India. Keeping this objective in mind and to gain strategic advantage, in 1983 India started with the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program. The aim of this particular program was to develop 5 missile systems. And what were those 5 missile systems? First was the Prithvi missile system, which was surface to surface. Second was Akash, surface to air. Third was Trishul, the naval version of Prithvi. Fourth was Nag, which was anti-tank guided missile. And the last one was Agni ballistic missiles. In recent days, these Agni ballistic missiles have been also transformed into intercontinental ballistic missiles. So this was the historical context that in 1983, India, with its broad-term objective to gain the strategic advantage, started with its own Integrated Guided Missile Development Program. Presently, we all know that there are several technological collaborations with the foreign countries, for example, Russia as well as Israel. The best example of this is BrahMos, whereby through technological collaboration, India is also developing its own niche specialty to develop this particular missile with the help of Russia. But still, we are the second largest importer as we have discussed, which means that the demands far outweigh the domestic supplies. So, in this very sense, now we shall understand that what are the various challenges which are hindering India's indigenization of the defense and space equipments. The first is the lack of clear strategic direction and coordination. There are several ministries and departments which are working in silos and they lack coordination, which delay in the decision making. Further, up to a very long period of time, India was lacking in a clear strategic path to build the indigenous defense systems. The second challenge is the lack of basic infrastructure and access to latest technologies. Now, in order to have domestic defense manufacturing industries, we need to have certain basic industries which are primarily heavy industries as well as the industries belonging to modern sectors, for example, critical minerals, semiconductors, etc. Further, India is also marred by high logistics cost, which in turn affects its forward as well as backward linkages. The third important challenge, which is the most recent one, is the economic slowdown. Now, because of the COVID pandemic, India is facing an economic slowdown. Its inflation rate is getting higher. Several critics have also challenged the GDP projections of India. So, that is why, in this overall backdrop of economic slowdown, the local defense modernization program has also been hit hard. And the last challenge is the process of technology development still remains opaque. And that is because still the government feels that defense and space sector are very much critical for the national sovereignty as well as integrity. And that is why this transparency is on a lesser account when it comes to the technological agreements to develop the defense equipments. So if there are these challenges, then obviously we must also have certain way ahead. What are those suggestions which can enhance our indigenization? First is that we must focus to build domestic industrial base supported by robust supply chains. For this, we can invest in developing the transportation. We must also promote ease of doing business. The center must provide capital support to the states also. So all these steps can help us to build the domestic industrial base. Second is we must categorize are the weapon systems in broadly two categories. That which are those weapon systems which we can make locally and which are those weapon systems which need to be imported. Once this categorization has been made, then the policies must be designed in this manner only. Obviously, we understand that all the weapons cannot be manufactured within our domestic boundaries. For example, there are several weapons which require the continuous support of certain critical minerals as well as rare earth metals. And for those resources, obviously, we have to depend upon other countries, for example, China, Australia, Bolivia, African countries, etc. So that is why we must be pragmatic enough and we must categorize the weapons which need to be imported and weapons which can be made locally. The third is using the modern technology, and therefore we must design certain policies which integrate artificial intelligence, software technology, as well as cyber security. Because now are the times whereby the cyber domain is not exclusive, it is present almost in every sector. Almost every machine or equipment is based on the computer programming. So that is why we must integrate various sectors of technology. And last is that the policies must also be designed in order to promote the in-house design capability. For example, when it comes to the Indian Navy, the Navy has the Naval Design Bureau, which has specialty in in-house designing capability. So this must be there for Indian Air Force as well as Indian Army. Till now, we have understood that what is the importance of having the domestic defense base, what are the various challenges, and what are the various suggestions. Now we shall look at what are the various initiatives or steps which have already been taken by the government in order to achieve this particular aim. So in this line, the first is the defense procurement policy, whereby the policy measures are such that indigenously designed, developed and manufactured equipments will be given the highest priority in the defense acquisition procedure. Similarly, there are also provisions to give preference to the Buy Indian, Buy and Make Indian and Make categories of acquisition. In order to promote and fasten and streamline the industrial license in this particular sector, eBiz portal has been developed which is completely online. Further, in order to reduce the government's monopoly and control, the restrictions of the annual capacity in the industrial license has been removed. Next is the outsourcing and vendor development guidelines. The government has come up with these guidelines with the core objective to promote the participation of the private sector, and among this private sector, the main focus is given on the small and medium enterprises. Further, recently you might be aware about this important step also, that Ordnance Factory Board OFB has been corporatized in order to have greater agility, accountability as well as freedom. Similarly, the government has gone for the uniform excise and custom duties for all the industries, whether it is private or it is government. This is done in order to have level playing fields, which in turn can promote competition as well as innovation. As far as the FDI, that is foreign direct investment policy, is concerned, the government has reformed its policy, and according to the latest policy, if the investment is less than 49%, then it can happen through the government route FIPB. If it is more than 49%, only then the approval of Cabinet Committee on Security CCS is required. And last but not the least, the government has created the Chief of Defence Staff post. Recently, the new appointment has been made on the CDS. And as we all know that this post was created in order to promote the defense modernization. So this was whole about indigenization and modernization of defense. We should revise this topic in brief once again. Initially, we looked at the historical context of the indigenization of the defense in India, which started in 1983 with the help of Integrated Guided Missile Development Program focusing on these 5 missile systems. Then we understand that what are the various challenges in terms of lack of clear strategic direction, lack of basic infrastructure, economic slowdown, and opaque nature of technology agreements in this particular area. Thereafter, we looked at what are various suggestions or the policy measures which government can take in order to overcome these challenges. And these suggestions were clear and dedicated policy to set up domestic industrial based with robust supply chains, categorization of weapons based on pragmatic views, integration of modern technologies, as well as developing in-house design capability. In the last, we looked at what are the various initiatives or steps which are taken by government till date in order to promote indigenization and modernization of the defense. The steps include defense procurement policy, eBiz portal, relaxation of industrial license policies, promotion of private sector, especially the SMEs, corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board, uniform custom duty, relaxations in FDI policy, and creation of Chief of Defence Staff post. This topic has appeared at page number 1 and is in relation to the recent Chinese move, which has again blocked some names of the terrorists which India and US wanted to include those names in the 1267 Sanctions Committee. So this is the very context of this very news article. There was a joint proposal of India and US to designate Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Shahid Mahmood under the United Nations Security Council's 1267 lists of terrorists affiliated to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And to this particular joint proposal, China has placed a technical hold. That is why this name could not be included in that particular list. And in fact, this is not a very new step. For last few years, China has been continuously holding the names of the terrorists or the terror groups which are provided by India to include in the 1267 Sanctions Committee. So, on one hand, we say that in order to stop the terrorism, the global effort must take place. All the major powers of the globe must come together in order to curb this global menace. Every year, there are a lot of terrorist attacks across the countries, across the world, which claim several lives as well as lead to loss of property as well. And in order to have that multilateral efficient mechanism, there was a 1267 Sanctions Committee which was made in 1999. According to this particular committee, any UN member state can add the name of a terrorist or a terror group that has affiliations to Al Qaeda and ISIS. So this particular step was made in the right direction. But now everything boils down to one particular thing in United Nations Security Council which is known as veto power or the permanent membership. And that is where the game changes. So in order to understand this, first we should understand that what do we exactly mean by placing a hold, because this has a technical definition. So presently the mechanism is that the names of the terrorist or the terror group which is to be included in this particular sanctions committee, it must be agreed to by all the members of the committee. And if any member who are the members of UNSC places a hold on the listing or objects outright to it, the listing cannot be adopted. So this is a general thing. But when it comes to those members who are the permanent member of the UNSC and also have the veto power, if they object to this, then obviously it cannot be adopted in any sense, because that is what veto is. And we all know that China is the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and that is why it uses its veto power when it comes to listing of certain terror or terror groups in the 1267 Sanctions Committee. Now, in order to resolve this issue, the committee is bound to resolve all such pending issues within 6 months. So, there is a time bound resolution mechanism of this committee also. But it can also allow the extensions in some situations. So this technically means that at the end of every 6 month period, the holding country, for example here it is China, has to decide whether to accept the listing or place a permanent objection to it. In recent past, you might have heard about the issue of Masood Azhar. So this was the same terrorists which was given by India to the terror organization in lieu of the lives of the passenger who were hijacked at IC-814 aeroplane. So India also wanted to list Masood Azhar in the 1267 Sanctions Committee, but there also China has put a technical hold on this particular name. Now the question arises that why China is continuously doing so. That is purely the geopolitical angle. That is the bilateral, or rather we say trilateral geopolitical dynamics between China, India and Pakistan. So this is all about 1267 Sanctions Committee of United Nations Security Council, which is in specific relation to the Al Qaeda and ISIS. It aims to curb all the activities of terrorists as well as terror organization. Those activities can be related to their financial activities, their movement from one country to another, related to arms, etc. Now let us move towards this topic. The topic is in the context that recently the state of Tamil Nadu has launched a mission to save critically endangered vultures. So this topic basically is relevant from the prelims perspective in the ecology section. So that is why this will be a factual topic. We need to understand certain facts related to this particular species, and here we go. Now, despite the fact that this heading generally says that vultures are critically endangered, but it is not true in absolute sense. As far as India is concerned, in India there are 9 species of vultures. These species are listed on the screen and you can see them. Out of all these 9 species, there are just 4 species: oriental white-backed, long-billed, slender-billed, and red-headed, These four species are critically endangered species. Rest are not critically endangered, some are endangered, some are nearly threatened, etc. So be very clear about it. Similarly, because not all the species are critically endangered, therefore, not all the species are listed in the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. There will be few species in Schedule 1, then there are other species which are in Schedule 4. So, this should be clear to you. So, this was regarding the IUCN status. Now comes the ecological significance of the vulture, that why we are trying to conserve the vultures. There are two important functions which vultures play in our overall ecosystem. First, they act as nature's garbage collectors and therefore keep the environment clean and safe. Second, they also play a valuable role in keeping the wildlife diseases in check. So one is the garbage collection and keeping the environment clean. Second is the stopping of wildlife diseases. So these are two primary functions of vulture. But despite their high ecological relevance and once upon a time their high abundance, nowadays their number are declining very fast. In India, along with the factors like poaching, ecological degradation, etc., there is one more dominant factor which is diclofenac. Now, this is a anti-inflammatory drug which is used to administer livestock and is used to treat the symptoms of inflammation, fevers, or pain in these livestock. So, what happens is that these livestock consume this diclofenac. After the death of these livestock, which are again then consumed by the vultures, so the diclofenac from livestock enter into the vulture's body, and this leads to renal failure in vultures, which damage their excretory system. That is why, in order to preserve and conserve the vulture species in India, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change launched a Vulture Action Plan 2020 to 2025. According to this plan, various states have to establish their state committees in order to coordinate the overall vulture conservation programs. Recently, government has come up with the idea to open four new rescue centers, and the places are Pinjore, Bhopal, Guwahati, as well as Hyderabad. So these were the certain key facts related to the vultures population, and this will help you in answering your prelims based question. Now comes this article, which has appeared at page number 6 and reads A New Lease of Life for Climate Action. Now, this life word is very important because in this article, the context of life is not general but it is very specific. And it is specific to the recent context of the life mission. Now, what is this life mission? At COP26, our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi announced the mission Life. And the idea of this life mission was to change the lifestyle approach. And by changing the lifestyle approach, we mean that people have to change their behavioral patterns in order to tackle the climate change. So this ideology basically believes that along with investing high amount of capital in technology, in human resources, in finding scientific and technological solutions, the low cost interventions can also be in the terms of changing the behavioral patterns of the humans. For example, people can move from the prevalent use and dispose economy towards the circular economy. This use and dispose economy is unidimensional in nature. It is unidirectional, that is, we use certain things and after the usage we dispose of those things. But this circular economy is basically based on the concept of 3 R's, that is, reduce, reuse, as well as recycle. So, this life mission envisions replacing the prevalent use and dispose economy, governed by mindless and destructive consumption, with a circular economy which would be defined by mindful and deliberate utilization. This life plans to leverage the strength of social networks to influence social norms surrounding the climate. An important term in this whole mission is pro planet people, also known as 3 Ps. So that is why this article becomes very important, because it is giving us a different perspective, and therefore we shall discuss that perspective also in much detail. The article says that the present strategy in India and worldwide relies on the following main pillars, which is focusing on the renewable sources of energy, investing in green technologies, geoengineering solutions, promoting electric vehicles, reducing the overall emissions, and encouraging the climate financing. So, this six pillar strategy is what we are currently focusing on. But there is a different perspective also, and for that we need to look at the present scenario worldwide. If we look at the North South division, we know that the North American region, European region, and the Chinese region, they share the maximum contribution of CO2 emission. On the other hand, South American countries, African countries, and South Asian countries, their per capita emission is far lower. Along with this, these countries share multiple problems like poverty, low finance, low technology, hunger, etc. So, for these countries, in order to tackle the climate change, if they have to rely on these strategies, it becomes very difficult for them because they are lacking in finance and technology as such. And that is why this article gives us a different perspective to tackle the climate change, which is low cost and high impact. And for this, the solution in this article is focusing on sustainable well being, focusing on sustainable development of humans in order to tackle the climate change. And there are very low cost interventions which we as individual or the government in the form of social legal policies can take in order to tackle the climate change and achieve the targets which are there in our nationally determined contributions. The first important thing in sustainable well-being is reducing the consumption and wastage. Presently, we are aware that world is facing two biggest challenges, that is consumerism and materialism. For example, if we closely analyze some of the marketing strategies which are taking place, we'll come to know that why is there so much focus on purchasing the new products. For example, every time when there is a new mobile phone released in the market, we witness a mad rush to buy that phone. Despite our older phones working in a proper condition, we still go to purchase the new phones because the market forces are so strong that they manipulate our mind. Similar is the case with other goods and services also. However, if we closely look at it, this is a unilateral way of functioning of market, which increases the consumption and generates huge waste. That is why, in order to have a sustainable well being, we need to reduce the consumption and wastage by promoting the 3R strategy, that is, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And if we apply all these three things instead of unilateral mode of economy, we will achieve a cyclic economy whereby the products will not be wasted earlier than their shelf life. So that is why the first thing is to reduce the consumption and wastage. The second important thing is greening the consumption patterns. Now, just reducing our consumption will not do much. We also have to green our consumption patterns. For example, if we need to build our homes, we should focus on reflective materials for construction rather than absorbing materials. So, this is greening of the consumption. And this strategy is very important because obviously, in today's world, we cannot cut ourselves from all the goods and services. But we need to be aware that what goods and services are of basic importance for us, and in order to avail those goods and services, we should be aware enough to analyze its carbon footprint. Similarly, another example is because humans cannot be locked up in their homes, and that is why they need to travel on daily basis. But we can green the modes of transportation. For example, instead of flights, we should focus on trains and buses. The idea is to use the public modes of transport wherever possible instead of one person traveling in a car and increasing the per capita emission. The third idea in this article is equal distribution of wealth, which will help to promote affordable housing for the people and efficient cooking methods. And last important thing is behavioral change, without which all these three things can be futile. So the article says that behavioral change in humans is of prime importance. As we have already discussed, humans should change their behavior towards their transportation patterns and they should go for public transport. Similarly, humans should decide upon the dwelling size which they need. Now, today we know that nuclear families are rising. And you yourself think that for a nuclear family, let's say a size of 4 to 5 people, if the family is possessing a huge home, then there will be excessive light consumption, there will be excessive water consumption. Okay, so it is desired that the dwelling size, the size of the homes, should be on the basis of the size of the families. If there is a joint family, that family can have a bigger homes. But if it is a nuclear family, that family should have smaller homes. And similarly, the people should also focus on their dietary habits. Now we know that killing of the animals release greenhouse gases, and that is why non-veg food is considered as one of the major contributors in greenhouse gas emissions. So whenever possible, you should go for seasonal plant-based diets. So these low-cost interventions are more suitable for a country like India, which face the challenge of capital as well as technology. And that is why the government now needs to set up the focused research groups for the conceptual framework of sustainable well-being. It should analyze the drivers of the affluent overconsumption and circulate the synthesis of the literature identifying the reforms of the economic systems as well as studies to show that how much energy we really need for a decent level of well-being. So that is why the sustainable well-being is one of the most important and a different perspective which holds a high potential to tackle the climate change and is also much relevant for the developing economies like India. So summing up the entire topic once again, the context of this topic is related to the Glasgow summit. This article gives us a different perspective that along with focusing on the 6-pillar strategy, that is renewable energy, technology, green engineering solutions, electric vehicles, climate financing and reducing emissions, developing economies like India should also focus on social and sustainable well-being in order to tackle the climate change. And the 4 important pillars of sustainable well-being are reducing the consumption and wastage, greening the consumption patterns, equal distribution of wealth, and promoting the behavioral change in order to uphold the personal accountability. And that is why the first step for the government in this regard should be to promote the research and investment with some scientifically proven data that this much of energy is required for a decent standard of living. And this will go a long way in tackling the climate change.